birthday. Never worked. We get the clapping away gone at the beginning now, folks, because it never comes through anyway. So we're starting our winter cleanse, which here in California, it just seems like, you know, what's the date today? January 21st. Okay. We're a month away from the solstice. So now the energy is like the floating water is now sort of going out here, at least, and you start to see like the grasses and the miner's lettuce is already bolted. And some of the plants that normally, if it was still raining a little bit, like a normal rainfall, like today, you know, for the last 10 days, I've been cutting it off pretty good, you know, like, you know, I probably would have had 7 little, at least mini rains in the last 10 days, according to my estimations. So, you know, I mean, that's what the little sprouts grow, and then the earth comes in and nurtures them with more follow-up rain, little bits here and there, but, you know, that's all been cut off. So you're seeing everything, nature adapts by going to seed quicker. That's what I'm observing is the plants bolt because they know, oh crap, it might not rain anymore. You know, because the way it's been so erratic. So they get into a little bit like 10 cups of caffeine kind of mode, like, oh shit, we get my life cycle done quick, but reproduce fast. Yeah, I know. I look at the 10-day forecast because I'm a surfer. I look at the tides. I look at everything out. I don't look at the satellite imagery anymore. It makes my heart and stomach churn seeing geometric shapes in a sky that used to have little vortexes going across the Pacific. Now it's all triangles and squares and demonic symbols and literally. Oh yeah, there's Freemason symbols and squares and triangles and stuff that makes my stomach churn because I feel it. Because the earth is all of us, you know, and so I see it from the meta view of the satellite and it's like, oh, turn it off, PTSD. Not right. So winter cleansing, you know, I was looking at the pun metaphor of, you know, cleansing physically generally means cleansing emotionally. And it's really hard to cleanse. Like imagine you're in, you know, somewhere in Canada under the snow right now and you're saying, yeah, I'm going to cleanse. Yeah, right. So that's why on a screen share here, I had started out with, there are some basic ways to cleanse though. And here's a couple of them is working with a couple of clients recently with gut problems. And so one of them is people take for granted they just fry their veggies in ghee or coconut oil. That's the first thing that has to stop is any kind of heated oil. That would initiate cleansing right there for some people. Just to stop using heated oils. You can still have all the oils you want, but you got to eat them raw. Which means no ghee either. It means raw butter because ghee is inherently dead, albeit a great dead fat. Magical thousands of years of proof it works, but it is dead. So if you have pancreatic insufficiency, enzyme insufficiency, then ghee would need to be replaced with raw butter. If you're sort of sensitive, then A2 raw butter, or, I mean, I'm on this Miller's Farm thing. I mean, there's sheep, cow, goat, probably horse butter somewhere on the planet, camel butter, I'm sure, yak butter. What other dairy producing animal do we got? You know, they all got butter, I'm sure. Pig butter, sure, see? So your fat's raw. So for those of you that need fat for your heat and energy in the wintertime, which is for at least half to 3/4 of the population in this sort of climate zone, they need that fat to stay warm in the winter. I tell this story a lot, but it's worth repeating that I was so inspired as a kid seeing like some documentaries of, they had talk about the Indians walking around in the snow in their bare feet. I'm like, I couldn't imagine it as a white man eating a lot of carbohydrates with cold hands and feet from that very thing. And overly stimulants do the same thing. Stimulants and over sugar used to, fingers would get cold, icy, and the core would get hot because all the heat's bottled up in here. And so these natives walking around in the snow in their bare feet. And then when I started cleaning up if you want to digest fat, you can't just clean up your liver and your gut. You've also got to clean up your lymphatic system because the fat isn't absorbed through the normal routes. Everything else as it goes into the lymphatic system, right from your gut into a lacteal, it's called, and then up into the lymphatic system. And so it doesn't go through the liver like everything else does. The fat is a whole separate route. I'm still trying to work that out process-wise, why the body does that. Because fat's a major component of cell membranes, and the brain of the cell is the membrane. So your membrane is your brain of your cell on the microcosmic level, and the nucleus is sort of the hard drive, you know, like the memory banks of its journey, if you will. So fats, I think it might get into the lymph system because if the body needs fat quickly, then it can get, because what happens is it gets absorbed in the lymph system and it gets dumped out into the superior subclavian vein, I think, if I remember my anatomy, and gets dumped out. And that's why if you eat a lot of fat, that's why I think the incidence of heart attack after a fatty meal is very high, because the fat's absorbed, it gets dumped out right near the coronary circulation, and so it's like clogging everything up, right? When you have more oil than water, what's more viscous, water or oil, right? So there's a lot of triglycerides. That's why you don't do a triglyceride test unless you're fasting for 12 hours. If you had a big fat-filled meal, your triglycerides are going to be like 600. And they should be between 70 and 100. See, so doesn't get too technical, but so there's a lot of, yeah.
Quick question about that. When making bone broth, is it better to not eat the fat that simmers so long because it's so hot?
A lot of theories on that. I've seen it go both ways. Some of the Western pricers go one way, some go another. All I can say is if I overdo that, I get brain fog and a little funky when I eat an overcooked, like the bone broths that go for more than 2 or 3 days. I've noticed some of the proteins that start to turn into MSG, basically.
And only the fat or in the whole thing?
Because glutamic acid is an amino acid, and it cooks out of the bones. And you get down to deeper and deeper in the bones. They used to, some of my Chinese teachers said they would boil bones down for weeks. They would just keep boiling them down and down and down. And it would turn into like this black char mush at the end. But we can't do that now because of the contaminations, basically. Because lead is a major contaminant, and even in the organic animals, just because it's inherent in our biology these days, so many contaminants. So when you're higher on the food chain, the bones are really, it's a storage place for good stuff, but also for bad stuff. You think about it. So I only do bone broths now 12 to 24 hours. Sickening, but yeah. Because I see brain fog for stuff longer. And it's like, yeah, I'm not going to do that anymore. It causes brain fog. That's why you journal after you eat and figure out stuff. Like I don't want to be like that guy, brain fogged, and then have to use caffeine to break it up, because lots of people drink coffee sometimes. They can't get the fat digested. So the coffee is a temporary solvent to get things moving again. It's not a good solution though, because it's overly stimulating in the end. Those bitters is a much better solution. The apple cider vinegar plus all the solvent herbs like greater celandine, which I don't know why this plant didn't blow up centuries ago. It's like the answer for so many liver problems, plus dissolving gallstones, for God's sakes. Greater celandine, yeah, it's magical. The plant came to me through a book. I was in bed in this VRBO in San Luis Obispo, and there was a wall of books, like literally that big, just bookshelf everywhere. And I'm laying there, took a bong hit. This is like 25 years ago. And my eyes kept being drawn to this book. I'm talking, everybody knows you in the bookstore, there's always that one area or that one book that you just, wow, I don't know why I'm drawn here. And it was called Of Men and Plants. Of Men and Plants. Anybody know French here? Okay, here's the last name. His name is Maurice, Messegue. How do you say that in French? Messegue? Messegue. So Maurice Messegue was the writer. He was an herbalist that grew up. He personally served the aristocracy of England and France. This guy did. He was so good. And he's the one, the greater celandine story is in that book of what a crazy life-surviving weed it was. He was put into he went from an herbalist kid living out in the country in France to, they put him in an all-boys Catholic school in this stone-filled castle. And there were no plants except one celandine plant growing vertically out of this vertical wall. It was growing out. And he said that plant, he worshiped it for 2 years while he was there. It's like he nurtured along with water, and it was his only buddy from the plant kingdom. I have before?
Yeah.
God, I just love that story. Any fats? Wait, so we got to, let's see, did you finish your question? All right. Remember, the people that are listening and can't hear necessarily the question, so I have to rephrase.
Do some fats have hydrophilic qualities?
So there's the phospholipids, like the lecithin based molecules, and they're the ones that sort of, that's why you emulsify mayonnaise with an egg yolk, which is an emulsifier. And so, and the cell membrane, right, you've got the bilayer of the cells like that kind of, and then, so the one end is going out. And so I think the water soluble end of the molecule is going out and the fat soluble is in. And so that's how it can mix things together, because it's putting the water and the oil together, right? Hydrophilic,
where it creates like a diffuse reaction. Energy transfer.
well, it depends on the energy of the water itself. I think like that machine, when I take the spring water and put it in that machine, it's like, especially this, the hydrogen gas off of it, I've been noticing a real big energy increase. So I believe our water's been dumbed down. We've been getting the spring water, and we freaked these two guys out there. I had to redig the spring because it comes down off the mountain, and then when it rains, it blows out the pipe. And so no one had done it yet. And so I got my stick and redug and redirected the water into the pipe. And of course it's murky for so long. We sat there for 10 minutes and it was still murky. Oh, fuck it. We put the buckets up and the water looks murky coming out, and we knew it was going to settle. So like, here's an example. See folks, so you can see the dirt and the sediment in there still. But this water, if you shake this apart, this sediment will settle in almost the same scenario every time. See those little clusters? If I break those clusters apart, they will come back together. It's a trip.
Got 20 gallons of that stuff.
You know what I'm talking about. Highly charged water, because it comes down out of the sky into the soil next to the bugs and the myceliums and the soils and the rocks and the mosses, and it's filtered and oxygenated, and that's highly charged, and it's full of life. So you put that in with your fat. I have enough to do it where this guy was talking about doing iodized butter. So putting the iodine with some little salt in butter to get iodine into people easier. So that's another example. Ideally, you could put some lecithin in with that to emulsify the fat, make it easier to get into the body. So to further tie the mysteries of life together on this one, the lymph system somehow has a channel that ends up near the gallbladder. I can't remember the name of the whole anatomical structure, because there's so many of them, but so on top of it all, the gallbladder, if your lymph system's clogged up, there's a connection to the gallbladder there. And I can't recall it directly, but I have enough manuals and colleagues who probably figure it out. I need to sit with you on your query, because I'm not quite feeling exactly what you're saying, but I think we could talk about it in private.
I was just thinking about how like the circulation works.
Right.
Having substances or proteins along.
Sure. Which is, again, is back to the importance of protein and the quality of protein in our diet, and how it just gets underreported. And again and again and again, people with gut problems, I get back to like, it's going to seem weird, but you actually need more raw food, because the medical people tell you to do the opposite. But that's the great inversion right there. You really need raw food with gut problems. You need to challenge the body to get strong again, not wimpify it with the white diet. Or I redid my 4 whites document, by the way, and I realized there's a 5th white vitamins. White vitamins, yeah, because they don't. Question, yes, Gail.
Does blueberry juice contain enough B vitamins to replace a pill B vitamin?
Yeah, theoretically, it really does. People would use, back in the day, there was a drink, Jensen used it, and Royal Lee, the founder of Center Processes, it was like molasses, either rice bran or wheat germ. Wheat germ doesn't have gluten in it, by the way. The wheat germ doesn't have gluten in it, a tiny amount. So it's not, but you have to get wheat germ within a week of being taken off the wheat. Otherwise, the wheat germ oil is rancid. So you need defatted wheat germ, very high in B vitamins. And everybody knew liver was, but the vegetarians didn't go for the liver. So the other one was, I made a drink with this, actually. There was a Bernard Jensen drink that I used to use too. What was in that? You got your minerals and the molasses. wheat germ or rice bran. I think I had both in mine. There was a missing link there. I have the document. I mean, we can look it up later, Gail, but yeah, there's a grouping in my system survey form that Monica's aware of it. And when you fill it out, group 8 on that is called B vitamin deficiency syndrome. And the reason why we call it a syndrome now is because when you give the synthetic Bs, you're actually depleting the body more. Why do you think? When you're given the synthetic Bs, why is the body more depleted in the long run the longer you take them? Why do you think?
Or attempt to process inorganic substance.
That's right.
Is it not complete, so it's drawing other-
James is going to love this answer. It's because the body isn't reading chemistry. The body is reading frequency, and it's the wrong frequency.
Now, is that because it's not a whole product?
Think about the premise of our lives. We've been brainwashed that chemistry is the answer, right? Our cells are reading chemistry and da-da-da. But I questioned that long ago. What is chemistry actually, right? It's just life process that we've labeled with these labels we've all agreed upon, right? But to me, the process of life is more worth study because the chemistry is just a photograph or snapshot, right? And so our cells aren't concerned with the snapshot at all. It's like, you know, the patriarchal version of the sperm and the egg is the sperms bombard the egg wall and finally then one of them gets through that's strong enough. That's not how it works. The egg is selecting the sperm it wants and opens the doors when it's ready. That's what's actually going on. But they don't report that to the general public because they want the patriarchal view, which is the strongest guy gets in. Not the smartest guy who knows the process of seduction properly, which the egg goes, I like that one over there. He's kind of cute. Yeah, that's where sort of natural law comes in. There's a whole thing going on of, you know, I don't know, souls coming in, we select them and they go, oh, I like that mom. And so, you know, it goes in and the egg goes, yeah, I like that soul there. Open the portal. Well, spirulina is an algae and algaes are related to fungus. So it could be a problematic for some people, especially with our fungal age. So let's go back to the oils. I gotta finish part of some of this at least. So the oils led to a big, long discussion, but basically the long and the short of it is if you have a jar of virgin coconut oil and raw butter and olive oil, and I really like the flax seeds and the chia seeds instead of the oils from them. One of my teachers is like, you know, if you can get the whole food form, do that. Don't do the extracted oil. So eat olives, you know, you can raw olives, which we have a gallon of brined sauerkraut olives, lacto-fermented olives in the other room from Colette Cassidy's milk farm that Mary Jane and I think. That's super sweet. So they'll be done, said 6 months. So they're brining, you know, darn it, can't break them open until the summer. So olives would be cleanse worthy, but to keep in mind with the reason why we don't like cheese on a cleanse, is there a dairy one on here? So I'm looking at a document, you guys, that you all on the cleanse, they can put you on the group, James. Like dairy is on here, like the winter cleanse cover master sheet and basic cleanse rules, how to start. And so the things you want to leave out. And so, yeah, no dairy except butter, ghee, kefir, and yogurt, best homemade from raw milk. So dairy is inherently congestive for most people, but the thing about the raw fat though, where in the summer you would say great, because the fat provides the thermal energy to quote, protect the righteous cheat. I have a little piece I'll read about that from my seasonal document that's next after this. So think about it, if you don't have enough blubber around you, then the core gets too cold. That's what the fat does for people like me. I don't have a lot of blubber, so I need the blubber from the food. Now, some of you have some weight on you, like, who did I see out surfing? Really, there's no wetsuit on sometimes. This really big woman was out one day, and in the end of the summer and the fall, and I paddled up to her. I'm like, "Are you cold?" She's like, "Oh no." I had my 4 millimeter on with booties, and she's like, "Oh, no, I'm not even cold at all." It's like, what? But she wasn't overweight. She just had a lot of meat blubber around her, and wow, that must be it, because I mean,
Well, wasn't that cool? I was swimming half a mile out there at Lake Fall.
with no wetsuit.
No,
Okay, pretty warm end of summer actually this year. Yeah. Let's see. Did I finish that? Oh, so the dairy part, if you really, so if the weather's cold, then have maybe your raw butter and maybe your ghee, raw milk kefir, raw milk yogurt. It just really depends on, like, sometimes when your gut's off, like I don't really want to eat in the morning. I'll just grab a pint of the kefir I got in there and it just does the trick for a little while. Remember, because my kefir has been around for 15 years. Kelly Deary contributed to it 15 years ago. It's so weird, and then I recharged it with some Miller's Amos Farm new curds recently, and it's just blowing up again. It's all bubbly and lovely. And I don't find it congests me. I can tell because when I sleep at night, my ability to breathe, because I've been doing pranayama for 30 years, it's like, oh yeah, that, like my last supper, I got a piece of what was that pie? Lullaberry pie I got over there, and I'm gonna probably have it at 11 or 11:30 at night tonight. But then tomorrow it starts, like, okay, it all starts tomorrow. That's kind of why I said for me, tomorrow's day one. Who's doing the cleanse? Actually doing the cleanse here? Drew, Jim, Monica. No.
I'm gonna do a different kind of cleanse.
So you were talking about yours. Yeah, so I'll probably, after we move, we'll be moving right in the middle of the cleanse. After we move, I might, if we actually are up there, which I'm 99% sure, then man, it's a great place to, there's a barn structure where we can have 50 people for a community dinner. It could have 20 people doing yoga. And that's, right now, it's the biggest single area there. So it's like, bring your cot, sleeping bag, sleep over, and there's power. You can have electric stoves open and music playing, dancing, people playing music, stereos blasting, whatever. It's out in the wilderness. There's nobody around. Good morning to yoga again. It's like, oh, you guys can wait till you see it. All right, wait, I'm back off kilter again here. Do not eat late. Now, most people don't understand this one. It really is important when you're cleansing to try and get done, especially this time of year around dark. Of course, we're violating it here, but that's the Last Supper. Laugh out loud. Drinking enough water, and the right kind of water. You got to drink the right kind of water, folks. And you don't need to glug your water. Like, one of my teachers used to poke fun at this. Like, this is the way most people drink water. Glug, 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 glug. He's like, no, you go. 25, 32s, and swallow. And I'm like, knock, knock. Wait a minute, why? Like, why does that matter? And he goes, your saliva has markers that tell the body what to do with the water or the food. And I'm like, wow. We're back to the frequency thing, get a bunch of your juices mixed in with it. And it generally helps chewing and oil pulling. That's what we do, oil pulling, because it gets these organs and lymph going in here and starts pulling literally the crap out of the body into the oil. And that's why you don't want nobody touching that oil pulling when you're done after 10 minutes of that. So you want it in the radioactive tank, these days. Yeah. I'm working on some theories about essential oils and other things you can add in with that over the last few years, like, like cedar's viewed as drawing, but I don't know that the cedar essential oil and a coconut oil would work. So you and I could maybe talk about something there. You could research that, like what would be an essential oil with the oil you would use for your oil pulling, like 1 drop of something. And you and I could collaborate, because I got some chemistry stuff we could look at around that. So water is important on a cleanse, and I think wind is important too. I try to get half my water in before noon, I would say. So
Before you, if you make most of your water before you eat, but not real close to eating.
yeah, so you try to get your water in it. Half your body weight in ounces is a decent measure. So if you're 180 pounds, that's 90 ounces of water, which is, what's that, 2.5 quarts. So if you're 200 pounds, it'll be 100 ounces, which is about 3 quarts.
But honestly, if you chew a quart before it'll do way more good.
Chew it, yeah.
2-3 quart strength.
Wow.
Really, really chew it, hold it. Imagine that it's going into all of your meridians. So wow, know that it's soaking in differently. I went from 6 quarts a day to 1, 2, or 3 quarts a day. I finally got hydrated. And I mostly only have about a quart.
Yeah, see, I try to get 2 quarts in a day, and then there's that hydrogen water. I've been doing the Adrenal Cocktail, which is basically a potassium source, a sodium source, and vitamin C, which is just lemon juice. I was telling you about that. So the easy sleazy is the pink potassium cave salt I discovered from Celtic. You still need a little bit more potassium, but the natural source of potassium and sodium in that raw salt paired with a little cream of tartar is an excellent potassium source. And anybody remember where cream of tartar comes from? It's a natural thing. TAR. It's like,
Is it like a horseradish?
no,
What
it's
kind of root?
it's
It's
not,
more, it's a root, I think.
but I can't remember. We could look it up on
Stuff.
Google it. So
Can we use osmosis?
RO is, I think amongst the water snobs is a little bit frowned upon. I've seen some RO filters after that haven't been changed often enough, and there was really mold growing in a couple of them that I saw. Just
You gotta change all of
yeah, but it's not. It's either, yeah. It's I wouldn't say it's top of the line, but it's acceptable. Yeah, it's acceptable.
It's really smart to drink lots of different waters. Anything that really tastes great and appeals to you,
That's important. It has to be taste worthy and appealing without being processed, taste worthy and
Yeah,
appealing. Yeah.
without being processed.
Yeah, that's important.
And give as much light as possible. When it's bottled, at least spin it in the bottle. It's so dead.
Yeah, it helps to activate.
Yeah, little vortex it. Thank you. Okay, I'm calling myself out. It's 9:02. So I want to get through this basic cleanse rule chart. And then if you're watching the video, you can go to the Health Alchemy website, and we have a cleanse campaign on there now. It's kind of cool. So if you sign up, then you get the link to some of these materials. And if you know me personally, you can always email me personally. So, but I think it's important to understand that, sometimes I've told the coffee story enough now. My friend who stopped coffee and he have a cleansing reaction 8 days later. And there's just so many stories like this. So the raw fats, not eating late, drinking enough water. Now the next one is, I don't like the nose, but you got to have the nose. No alcohol or caffeine is best. And I have seen what caffeine does to certain people, including myself, when I overdo it. And remember, plants make it as an insecticide, and they make it, for things that aren't necessarily good for us. So the fact that we get stimulated and want to pee and poop should be a red flag. But I've been using it. I tell myself a story, and I had a mate earlier. Yes, there it was. So there's just this funny paradox with it. So I figure my intention for the cleanse was every 3 months, it allows me to care for my earth suit more, because it allows me to check in on my habits. Yeah, I don't want to be in the habit of caffeine. It causes a pause, and then I can re-choose again later. Right?
Just
Right.
being healthy.
It's just that my contention is, in today's world, most of us are more toxic than we realize. And the humility of what I went through and saw what came out of me, it's like, we've all got a lot of work to do. And it requires, if you really want to get to like the baseline, you got to turn your guts inside out, because there's stuff in there that all of you've got that you don't want to know who's in there. Believe me, because I went through the hard fought work for 10, 15 years of it. It was hard fighting for a while. And then I realized I got to end the fight. That's part of the game. You got to end the war. I'm going to kill those bugs. I'm saying to myself, I'm going to kill those candida. I'm going to kill them. I'm saying to myself. And then they didn't start going away until I had this insight after they crushed me one day for 3 hours at the end of a football game. And I refused to give in to my cravings. I've told that story a few times. And it's like, I'm not giving in to these cravings. And then they poisoned me, literally. And I woke up like I got trampled by elephants. And I asked my gut, I said, did you do that to me? And the bugs are like, yep, you didn't feed us. And then I realized I got to end the war, because I ain't going to win.
More than.
Yeah. And I realized, so I started saying, what if we just prune a few of you guys? I used the prune metaphor, and then stuff started coming out of me. So it's interesting. And then I started getting more like, oh, I see how this works. I got to work with these guys because they're in control. There was such humility to realize that my cravings weren't my own necessarily, for sweets especially. I knew the first time I craved kale and salmon and rice for dinner when I was 29 or 30, I knew that I'd gotten somewhere. Like that's a natural craving. You know, because Snickers bars, Three Musketeers, Cheetos, Ruffles, Wonder Bread, SpaghettiOs, let's see, Twinkies, Chocodiles, Ralph's, raviolis, honey buns, Tootsie Rolls, Jolly Ranchers, apple pie. We go on for hours, I think.
Lemon Hostess pie. Anyway.
Oh yeah, hot tamales, Mike and Ike's,
Yeah.
Count Chocula, Blueberry.
Wow.
I was into it. Me and my brother would fight in the grocery store about which sugar-coated cereal we'd get, you know. We were addicts, you know. I'm getting Blueberry. No, Count Chocula. Fruit, yeah. Fruity Pebbles, you know. And usually the most manipulative kid would get it, you know, unfortunately.
Well, that's what we hope, because I grew up with that. So when you talk about the stories, it's like, oh, if he could do it, I can do it. I got this.
Yeah. Okay, so none of that. If you need to do caffeine, I found that the half-life of mate, if you will, it burns through the body pretty fast. For some people, green tea and matcha is quite fine. But just keep in mind that green tea, you know, caffeine's like, green tea is not caffeine, first of all, right? And coffee is not caffeine. It's just one of the elements, part of it. Coffee is inflammatory, no matter which way you slice it for most people. Some people get away with it. They metabolize it quite nicely. And I hate those people. And then others, but for most of us, they gotta like stay away from it. Coffee up the butt is a whole different story. I can't believe how much different it is. Most of you out there won't even want to talk about it. So I'll move on. It's part of wishing I had taste buds downstairs. I felt that. I want a latte downstairs, honey.
Imagine what it's like when stuff comes out.
Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, you can't just have those taste buds for
Oh, that's just wrong. Okay, here's an important one. For you beginners, if you just follow the basic cleansing rules right here and don't do anything else, you'll cleanse. So here's the next one. No foods made from flour at all. Nothing from ground flour. Zero, nothing, nada. They're inherently congestive. One of the worst congestors, because most of the flours, how long, those of you who don't know, because some of you know from Craig heckling you, you know, about it. It's really important to know this. How long, we've known this for 110 years, how long before wheat's ground to a flour before the germ oils are rancid?
2 days.
1 week.
Wasn't it in 1917 that the FDA wasn't going to white in flour because it's toxic?
1906 was a Pure Food and Drug Act by Harvey Wiley, and then I don't know about 17.
Flour in particular.
I don't know that date. I don't know that date, but the Pure Food and Drug Act clearly stated that white flour and white sugar cause cancer, right? So you think 11 years later, there they are trying to, you know. So
Look at it.
yeah, I
It
just,
started in 1906, FDA.
Pure Food and Drug Act.
Thank you.
Go to Harvey Wiley on Wikipedia and you get some data from there.
They said that both of those causes cancer.
They knew in 1906 that they cause cancer. And the lobbying interest shut it down. They were writing about the propaganda machine, people like us 100 years ago. So the propaganda machine has held us back for over 100 years or longer, much longer than that.
Could it be that it's just a seed that they tried to plant? Because Joe Dispenza was talking about just like the mind can heal you, it can kill you.
That's right.
So my grandpa had white flour every day, and he had sugar every day, multiple times a day. And that's how he lived in a long life. And I think it was an advantage, right? That he didn't
He didn't know.
speak the language.
He didn't know. Not knowing helped him. And there's one,
Ah,
but he lived on Madeira. You have to understand, there's one other factor here that's bigger than the food. This man lived on an island off of Morocco called Madeira. And he was isolated from all the idiots in the rest of the world. That's why he was so happy, because the energy, the World Surf League has a major contest on Madeira. Beautiful waves. I have a bunch of YouTubes I've been looking at around it. Like, so I'm going to meet the guy in Africa there, because it's off Morocco, but it's part of Portugal. So I'm getting these visions of meeting this guy in Africa, and I'm just looking at this golden man today going, wow, I'm going to meet this guy in Madeira. So I believe the white flour is one factor, because we all have chi drains, and you got away with the white flour because you had other elements that we don't have, right?
Right.
But if you try to do that diet in the city, sorry, it's going to cause some problems, right? And plus the wheat that's in Madeira is much different than the wheat in the States too. Much different beast
When
too.
he came here in the 60s, he loved sugar. He put it in everything. His French toast, in his coffee, 2 cups. It was tons and tons of sugar. And I'm like, wow. You know,
And always white sugar.
always white sugar.
Wow.
So then when I started learning about Joe Dispenza, I said, it has to be the mind. He
Yeah.
said, oh, it's a good thing I never learned to read and write in my own language. Why would I learn in this language?
Oh, that's
He
very
goes, because
smart.
if you don't know it, then you can't be programmed to think what they want you to think, that it's gonna kill you. And I'm like,
Wow.
oh, that makes
That's how
sense.
powerful the mind is.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and he's the one that gave me red meat. He's the one that washed his hands with his urine. Like, he did all this crazy stuff that people could never understand, and he outlived everyone in his generation. Everyone, and he was the oldest one.
Oh, I
So
love
the
stories
mind
like
is
that.
so amazing, because I mean, we can do all the food part, but if we don't change the way we think, you're screwing yourself.
He washed his hands with his urine.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
So
No, that's awesome.
No, not always. Like, when we would go out, like, he sold at the flea market, so he'd like turn around and you know, like, sell his stuff. He's like, oh, you have no idea how sanitizing it is, but yeah, it's perfectly sterile, you know. So when I met
Isn't that great?
Greg was standing in the urine, I was like, Greg, what are you doing with that?
Great. Really
It's
is.
so liberating, you know.
Really is great.
I'm peeing all over the yard now. I'm peeing all over the yard. Oh, I can let it fly, you know.
There's a documentary on Gaia called Urinate. Really mind-blowing.
Urinate.
People that don't
Urinate,
have
folks, on Gaia.
go to the documentary.
Urinate.
It is a great film. I recommend
Oh my
everybody
gosh.
to watch it.
Okay.
Well, I have one thing to add about that. I was studying all those mushrooms that we found yesterday, John, how big, huge red mushrooms with white spots. And we looked them up, because John T knew about it. So, okay, so apparently shamans use them, but what they do is they drink the pee of somebody who's eaten it, or they drink the pee of deer who've eaten it. Really?
How are they gonna catch
And
the
they get
deer?
a
Hey, will you stop for a second?
Yeah. You know, maybe the deer are
I didn't mean to cut you off. So what happens after the creature has eaten the thing? And what happens after you drink the urine?
well, then you get a hallucinogenic effect, but you don't get poison. Like the mushrooms can be poisonous, I guess, but I don't know.
That's why you have your partner eat it and then you drink their urine
You can
afterwards,
eat
right?
raw.
Damn.
Here, you be the guinea pig and you eat it and I'll drink your urine.
Wow.
It
Wow.
just goes back to Craig's natural law, right? Because if we don't know in our mind, you know, like if we're not convinced that we can heal ourselves just with thought alone, then, you know, we give so much more power to the food, or that's what I'm getting from. And
Yeah, well, I had a 71-year-old Polish teacher in 1995 at the Kushi Institute, and I still can't, this woman was inspiring. 71, and she was doing a morning workout at 7 a.m. and kicking the 20-year-olds' butts. They're just barely even break a sweat. Like, what? So she said, I was all into the food, you know, I was all obsessed. And she's like, you're just like, dude, you know how much chi your body actually gets from your food? And I was like, uh-oh. She goes, your breath is way more important. Your mind's way more important. And she goes, yes, the food's foundational for everything. But if you're messing it up with your thoughts and your bad breathing and, you know, your food's 1/7 of your total chi. She was joking around, I think, but she goes, 2/7 is your breath, 2/7 is your thought. She had a whole formula for it. And I was mortified. I was like, 'cause everything was about food at that point for me. I'm a Taurus, you know, it's all about food. You got to eat right. And I had my macrobiotic lunchbox I carried around with me, and I got shattered by a few people, and I just crushed. That ain't the way to do it.
All of your thoughts are so to 100. Usually have very positive outlook. My stepmother ate ice cream almost every night before she went to bed. She's 102, but she thought ice cream was good.
Yeah. So I won't go into that now. I'm gonna, because
Yeah.
just we're on the recording still. I'm on a 9:15 thing. Thank you, Jay. Everybody about that's an important thread. So the flour, we got this again, a long thing about the flour. We just talked about the dairy. I think it's important that a lot of people that are 100% or nothing kind of people too. I like people, they start a cleanse and they have their first indulgence and then they quit because they're 100% or nothing kind of people. And it's really important that you forgive your sins, because all sin really means is I missed the mark. You know, I missed the mark, big deal, you know, move on. And that, because what happens is there's the psychology of it is, oh, I've given in, I'm weak, I'm worthless. It just confirms it. So why bother? It's sort of the shame story. A lot of people get this shame cycle. And then, but the most toxic thing is if you're going to indulge, then you can let go and enjoy what you're doing. And then it breaks that shame cycle. And it's really important to be a little vigilant after the eating of it when those thoughts come in, because they will come in. It's just to let them move in like a cloud and move on and not get all attached to them, because they're not really what we are anyway. And that sort of breaks that shame cycle, because that's what perpetuates the eating, is the shame cycle, I believe, is the after the fact shaming. And we all have our variations of that.
Frequency cycle. Or like the Bible saying that Jesus, it's not what goes in you that defiles you. All these emotions are coming out of you. It doesn't matter if it's food or drugs or people. That's lowering the frequency.
Right, because in the end, that's what I'm teaching a lot of the Lyme. I have good success with Lyme patients because I tell them it's about your life force, because these bugs are already in there and they're cloaked and they can shapeshift. And so if you keep your life force strong, and one guy was as simple as he was just, to be blunt, he was ejaculating too much. Get a flare up, and I went down the checklist with him. I'm like, okay, last one here. Okay, I don't like to talk about this. I gotta talk about it. You know, what do we gotta say? He's jokingly, are you blowing a load too much? Jokingly, and he's like, the look on his face went from like kind of semi-smile to a frown almost instantly, and I'm like, ooh, we got onto something here. He goes, and then the light bulb went on. I saw, yeah, we have this thing called the truth response in facilitation, where I watched the truth response. I watched the light bulb, I could feel the whole thing, and he got it. He went, yeah, I am. And I go, just as an experiment, just hold it in for a week or so and see what happens. Flare up over. Whatever his Lyme flare up was, I forgot what it was. Yeah, within a week, his flare up was over because he had conserved his life force and wasn't leaking it out through his penis. OHAS, yeah, OJAS. That's right. Like nectar, amrita, you know, different words for these divine nectars. And if you don't think that your sexual fluids are called amrita for a reason, because they're charged with life force. And I used to study this book about sexual kung fu, where these Chinese masters, they would try and draw each other's life force out by having sex with them and forcing the other one into orgasm and climax. So they could suck, the woman, you know, would suck the life force out of the man, the guy would call it sexual kung fu.
Exactly.
Well, it sounds like an even exchange.
Well, they always tried to like kind of conquer each other, was the weird part though. You're like, yeah, I won that battle. I got more chi out of you than you got out of me, you know, kind of like, what is that? You know, subtle ego, right?
You're recording?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
This is very entertaining for the audience. One of my clients actually, he was over here this week picking up a cleanse kit, and he goes, yeah, I love watching you on YouTube. So he's one of the ones I finally found out. There was a 40 or 50 that watch. He's like, keep it going, man. It's great. You're a saint, man. You know who you are. You're a saint. Animal protein is another one worth talking about. I wrote here, some types will need animal protein if not able to rest as much, and as need and eating it raw or very undercooked, best option. So I had a mostly raw steak earlier, and I had a mostly raw fish earlier. But I heated the chard up and I put the fish in and sort of lightly cooked each side, but it was already marinated. So it was a wonderful steelhead actually from New Leaf. And then the meat was then Gene had salted it. So it's for me, there was a psychic something the last 3 to 5 days that I needed the animal protein and the meat. Otherwise, when we get relaxed and safe and the sense of welcoming, then and the weather's like it is here, because we're probably going to have it in the 60s for the next 5, 6, 7, 8 days, then that means you can eat a little more raw and a little less animal protein. But generally, most of the old masters and worldwide pretty much are in agreement, high states of being are generally attained with not eating meat, generally. There's definitely exceptions to the rule. So the wintertime is more about time of reflection. I was hoping to mention that for a minute, so I'm just going to digress here for a second to spend time reflecting on life, because it's a reflective time of year, ideally, right? More than ever this season, protect the righteous inner energy of your body. Keep covered up and avoid strong winds and downpours, especially if you're weak. I'm going to finish this because it's kind of important, I think. Right, that's called wind invasion. And this is the close of one cycle. It just ended. A new cycle is beginning. It's like, this is the pregnancy cycle. This is the pregnancy right now of the earth. Because spring is when everything emerges, right? So this is literally, if you reflect on that, you'll feel this very fertile energy is all I can say. The funny thing is when water, the element of winter, passes over metal or rocks long enough, part of the metal or minerals leach into the water, feeding another cycle. Water carries information. Water is a storage vesicle for other substances. Humans become attached to things. Have we fully let go to open space for the new things in our lives? This is what spiritual edema is like. We cannot dream new dreams until we let go of the old. So that's kind of what this season is, a reminder. We haven't let go from last year, because the fall is generally when that's the metal element letting go. And now we're in the water, the things are starting to sprout, if you will. And so that adds a little context to go back to the other document now for the animal protein. So if you need that, protect your life force, then by all means, have the meat. Sorry, folks, I'm trying to find back that page we were just at. There it is. No, that's not it. There, no, that's not it either. There it is. Okay. So animal protein, oils need to be raw, so no frying in oils ideally. The bone broth thing, if you feel like you got liver congestion or lymphatic problems, probably best to skim off the fat and maybe freeze it and use it for something else later.
Yeah.
You can fry with it. You fry with it, yeah. Most fruits and vegetables are okay if you have autoimmune problem, and especially leave the nightshades out. Nightshades are really summer vegetables anyways. They're not meant for the cold season. If you have like sun-dried tomatoes and you want to use those, fine. If you have canned tomatoes, maybe. Potatoes are they're a good question, because potatoes have the same glycemic index as white sugar. So the glucose in potatoes gets into your bloodstream as fast as white sugar does, which can cause a big spike in blood sugar and then a big insulin response, which is generally not favorable for the hypoglycemic people.
Sweet potatoes?
Sweet potatoes are a different beast entirely, yeah, so those are fine. They're encouraged, the sweet potato and the yam, much more than the potato. Red potato way better than white. Russet's probably the worst. Michael Pollan did a whole piece on that long ago about the GMO factor of russet potatoes. I still love them, but.
This is true. I read this somewhere that after you refrigerate potatoes to cook and heat them again, later it changes the starch in, so it's like better prebiotics for people.
It's interesting. It's worth looking into.
I think so.
So raw potato juice and raw potatoes, you could survive on those if you needed to. Very high source of vitamin C, raw potatoes are.
And really great stomach tone.
Yeah.
Especially in red.
They used to do potato boluses. They put it up in the rectum to draw toxins out of the rectum too, as an old technique.
Bolus?
Like, you cut it to size, of course.
BOLIS?
I believe so. Yeah,
US.
potato
Wow.
bolus. Yeah. US. Yeah, pretty
Wow.
fascinating. Like if I could find the reference for you. Grains and beans is a question mark for some. So that's where you need to know.
Rectangles.
Huh? What are we, okay, sorry. I was really trying to get through this. There's a few more up here. Grains and beans for some. So if you don't know your metabolic type, then and you want a quick response, if you're a blood type O, you're probably not a grain person. That's just, if you know your blood type, that's a good way to start. If you're a blood type O, probably the question you want to ask is probably, I don't want grains and beans. If you're an A, a B, or an AB, then you can actually pulse test all your grains. That's the Arthur Coca pulse testing system. Just take your pulse, write it down, 70 beats a minute, put the suspect food in your mouth, take your pulse again. And if it changes down 5 or up 5, then that's an old physician's test for food allergies. But why don't they use it right now? Developed in the 70s, because it's free and effective and it works. And no side effects. That's why it's not being used anymore. Arthur Coca is his name, MD. Developed it in the 70s. So that's a way to check for your grains and beans. And then if you're metabolic type protein types and your ancestors are from the Northern Hemisphere, no grains for you much. Maybe oats and what are the Scottish got? They got the oats and the barley, I think, in Scotland, right? And then Siberia has the buckwheat. Yeah, so your cold climate grains are like buckwheat and oats. I think rye handles a colder climate, barley. The old grain triticale, I always like that one, triticale. Triticale. It's a hybrid of rye and wheat, I believe. Triticale, a friend of mine grew it. Looks like rye, kind of interesting grain. So I'd say you'd have to kind of check those individually, but generally that's what we used to do with the Ayurvedic cleanses is you do khichdi, which is mung beans and rice. You make a big pot of it and you eat that for weeks while you're cleansing. And I always felt like crap when I did that method. Now I do bone broth and, raw meat, raw dairy and big salads. And that's my cleanse, And then grains are like, ugh, I'm gassy and brain fog and screw that. Oh. Entirely Northern European ancestry, besides I have a Portuguese, 1/8 Portuguese, which is my saving grace. That's why I have darker skin. Okay, most foods in a package. Does that make sense? Foods in a package are pretty dead, so not cleanse worthy. No nuts or nut seed butters. So seeds are generally okay, but nuts for most people are worth stopping because most nuts that you don't know about you're having out there are probably somewhat rancid. And our nutrition group, Anna was putting out, like importance of fish oil and why I've been telling people you got to have the right fish oil because there's a rancid oil causes the very thing a good fish oil stops, which is oxidation. And rancid nuts cause the very thing that they help with, which is heart disease. So you've got to have, pun intended, fresh nuts.
Probably soaked and sprouted.
You can sprout your nuts if you want that way. Pun intended. I don't like my nuts soaked and sprouted myself. It's too wet, but personally. And really raw nuts are better than really cooked nuts because guys don't want their nuts cooked. I'm gonna milk that one along a little bit. I'll milk that one along a little bit. So nuts are tough, I would say. For some peanuts, raw peanuts could be a good option. Let's see, a less intrusive nut. I personally found the Brazil nuts not very intrusive if I do 4, 5, or 6. So maybe raw Brazil nuts because they're high in selenium, which you need for your immune system and a bunch of stuff. You got to get them in those sealed. I think David Wolf or one of those companies has them in a sealed 1 pound bag. That's what way you want to get them. Because they're coming from the tropics. Yeah, they're not coming from anywhere close. Packaged milks. Don't have any packaged milks. So many of my clients got almond milk and oat milks, and they're deader than a doornail. They're no better than pasteurized milk, one of my teachers said.
All kinds of crap.
Yeah.
Oh, they're still putting vitamin D2 in some of these soy milks. D2 is like banned, in some form back in the 50s, and they got reintroduced under a different name. It's like, this is disgusting, James. You know the whole story. It's like, what the hell? This thing was banned and they reintroduced it under a different name. So the unsuspecting public, they figured a couple of generations went by since the 50s and everybody forgot. And so they reintroduced it. Laugh out loud moment.
So
Okay.
what's D2 called now?
I think it's called ergosterol now, ergosterol, I believe. And they had a different name before, I believe. Like CoQ10 is ubiquinone or ubiquinol. So you see the careful marketers using the names like, we have the most ubiquinone in our CoQ10, but it means the same thing. They twist the words around like, all natural doesn't mean anything, by the way. When you see all natural on a label, it's a red flag for me, actually. Because it doesn't mean anything.
So what's organic?
Exactly.
I'm sorry, it just is.
And salt. People go, I have sea salt. And like, that still means refined sea salt. You have to see the brand, Himalayan, blah, 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 pink, Celtic, blue, Hawaii. What's that one I got? I love this one. Green bamboo jade salt from Hawaii, a raw salt where they add bamboo juice into the ocean water and then dehydrate it in this special raw chamber. I think it's on Molokai or one of those outer islands on the Hawaii.
Leprosy.
Yeah, the lepers are making the salt for us. That's right. It's a leper salt factory, folks.
Just one quick thing, if peanuts are technically legumes, does that make them a little more suitable for consumption or no?
I was always a fan of what George Washington Carver used to say about peanuts, so I think it's a really healthful food. Royal Lee spoke highly of them too. So I still believe in peanuts. It's just that I think that they're moldy and not grown properly anymore. And that was in The Secret Life of Plants, that book. The George Washington Carver stories about peanuts was in that book, actually. Fascinating stuff. And there's tree nuts too. They have this thing called tree peanuts. What's that company, that raw food vegan company sells them in the 1 pound things. And they're pretty good too. You can salt them up and they're pretty delicious. The last one on this sheet, then we can probably turn the camera off and just talk amongst the group for a minute, is here's a really interesting one. Eat the opposite of how you normally eat for a couple of days. So if you're used to eating late, make it an effort to plan your day to eat early. If you eat early, we'll see what it's like to eat late. You'll feel like shit and you'll go back to eating early. Real quick. Everybody that does that. That's why Karsten's never here. You're like, I'm not eating your community dinner. So if you're on the video watching this, then this document is available and it has just the basics. It's called the Winter Cleanse Master Sheet. And there's lots of ideas in here. And that's the way you start. And unfortunately, I had 5 or 6 other things I was going to do on a screen share, but we talked so long that our free public material ends here, unfortunately. But fortunately for us, we can. So we're going to talk off screen here. And remember that if you're a beginner, the best thing to do is the SMART goal. What's the SMART goal?
Smart, measurable,
Short. No.
Simple and
Smart
specific.
is
Different versions of the same thing, but I have simple and specific for S. Measurable,
Attainable.
attainable.
and time bound.
What's R?
Are
Ours.
Realistic.
realistic.
And T is time bound. So, you could have a SMART goal like, okay, like my buddy, he just stopped coffee and he had a cleansing reaction after 8 days. And so you stick with something for 3 weeks or 4 weeks. What did they break the habit? Is it 4 weeks to break a habit? 3 weeks, three weeks to break a habit?
21 days.
21 days to break a habit. So if you can stay, hey, wow, I got the group support. Got a bunch of people doing this. I got a group of friends together. We'll watch the videos and we'll stop something like we went up through that list tonight. Then, if you follow that list and just do that, and even if you eat meat and dairy, you're going to eat a lot of veggies. For those of you out there, I had a housemate. I won't mention her by name, but she moved in pretty morbidly obese, 200 pounds plus, 5'5", 6", so pretty round. And she wanted to lose weight. And I said, look, the Craigie program is this. The simple one is more water, a lot more veggies, no wheat. She wasn't already drinking alcohol, so no alcohol, no stimulants. And that's pretty much it. And she lost 50 pounds in 3 months.
Wow.
It was the sweets that got her, I think, in the end. So, that's really inspiring for some people to just realize if I just eat more veggies, and more water and less of the wheat and the crappy foods, and don't eat late, some basic guidelines, you can do a lot with just that. And you go to the basic food charts, it's like, well, so for me, the basic food charts, like, well, the way I eat every day, so I'm basically eating a cleansing diet for a lot of people myself. So I'll go a little deeper once we move, but that's the thing. If you're trying to be out there in the world, please don't fast. If you're a psychic empath drawn to this crowd kind of thing, if you fast, you got to be alone with your family and friends and safety, because the world is really polarized right now. And we're 4 or 5 of us today. We were all charged by another person's energy. You know, it's like, it's important that we acknowledge these things and maybe even say, maybe this isn't even mine. When we're out there in the world, and especially when we're fasting and opened up, you know, or just did yoga, you know, like, maybe that's occurring phenomena is just going on around me and I just took it on. A lot of people are polarized right now. So it's really good not to take stuff personally. And when we can, at least, and trying to get triggered. Because so cleansing is it's a quick way to lower life force, right? You get out there in the world, you've been fasting, and then suddenly, oh boy, the button gets pushed, and then life force explosion, you know, chi drain. And yeah, I think that's a good poker face over there. We're going to turn off. Good night, folks.